This week's exercise of the week is a side-to-side lunge with a forward reach to floor. So there's a couple of cool details to pick up in this one. One of them being my imperfect form for this exercise. So let's address that first. What we want for a clean side lunge is to stay in the frontal plane, which means pure sideways motion, or as close to pure as we can get. What you'll notice in my lunges is I take a small step forwards as I'm bailing out of that frontal plane ever so slightly, maybe half a foot length. I'm stepping forwards, and that is my way of escaping the frontal plane because I'm not fully comfortable lengthening purely sideways. So I'm stepping forwards into the sagittal to escape. So watch out for that for people if you are coaching somebody else doing this. Nice way to control for that is to do the lunges on a line, and you can just step from one position on the line to another position on the line. It's pure sideways. But obviously with a side lunge, we're going to be getting a nice stretch and a lot of length through the adductors. However, when we add in a forward reach to floor, we do that in a lot of our exercises, and the primary reason we will do that is to create more length in the posterior chain. So by reaching forwards, especially to floor height, we're going to be flexing the spine and asking for a huge amount of flexion at the hip. So we've got a lot of length in the glutes and also the proximal hamstring. So the distal hamstring, the far end of the hamstring, is going to be short because the knee is flexed. However, at the proximal end, the pelvis end of the hamstring, we're near maximum hip flexion here. So we should feel a good amount of stretch and activation as well. We also experience the same thing in the non-working leg, the inside leg, where we get the adductor, but also the medial hamstrings will be getting a huge amount of stretch as well, depending on exactly where you reach these hands. So this is a great way to open up the hips, ready to squat, but also get that hinge pattern going because you're going into a very deep hip flexion, as I mentioned earlier. And because you're reaching forwards with the hands, if you've seen one of my recent exercises of the week videos about the posterior hip mobility, the forward reach forces a posterior counterbalance. You're going to have to send your hips to the back wall, otherwise you'd fall forwards, and that creates length and activation in the posterior chain at the same time. So we're getting a huge amount of stimulus here. If you've ever done these, you'll have felt how you might get adductor stretch, you might get glute load, you might get hamstring length and load, and even a little bit of back as well, which is no bad thing if you're flexing the spine. It should be involved, but depending on where you're emphasizing in this movement, you will get more or less of those elements. Those are the key things that we're looking for. Other details I like to look for here are trying to keep the fifth metatarsal head, the pinky toe, on the floor, just so we're not rolling in, and that will reduce the amount of adductor length that we get from the exercise. But as always, guys, please give this a go. See how it feels in your body. Let me know what you notice as you do it in the school discussion board or in the comments below. And I look forward to speaking with you again next week.